Welcome, everybody, to We Need to Talk Now, presented by AT&T, right here on CBS Sports Network. I am Ashley Nicole Moss, and I am joined by two very special guests. We have Erica Ayala, and joining us, I believe the first man to ever join us on this show, we have Chris Williamson. Welcome, record breaker.
All right. I didn't know that. It's an honor. I'm glad to be in y'all's presence. Because you guys are so phenomenal at what you do, and really can't wait to talk WNBA here today.
Flattery will get you very far, Chris. Yes, we are here to talk all things WNBA, but first and foremost, I have to read this note from our producer, Emma, because she wanted to give a little shout out to her school, Northwestern, and their women's golf team, who upset Stanford yesterday to win its first national championship in program history. So congrats to the Cats, and congrats to Emma. I know she is very excited about that. We're going to shift gears back to the WNBA because that is what this show is going to be all about. And the first week of the season is fully underway, and there was a lot to discuss. There is a lot to discuss. Erica, I'll start with you. What is something that really stood out to you the most about opening week of the W?
Wow. Like you said, there was so much. I think, I was in New York for that game against the Las Vegas Aces, and that seemed like a mid-season matchup. Both teams came out to play, and then New York ultimately taking that win. That was very exciting for me. Phoenix, I think, has started off well. I know we're definitely going to be talking about the Phoenix Mercury on today's episode. But for me, I think just the intensity with which this WNBA season started, thinking about being at that Liberty game, seeing how the Mercury have been able to start their season with some new pieces has been really exciting.
And Erica, that's your former team, the New York Liberty, because you signed a one-day contract. I'm wondering when's the 10-day coming?
I mean, listen, you got to work piece by piece, delayed, not denied, right?
Chris, what is something that really stood out to you? There's obviously so much to get into, but we'll start with the biggest thing on your list.
The biggest thing for me is probably the emergence of Sonia Citron and Kiki Area-Finn for the Mystics, right? These two rookies have let it be known from jump, even going back to preseason when Kiki Area-Finn, shoved Sophie Cunningham to the ground and was not scared whatsoever, stood on business. The way they have transitioned from the college game to the pros has been pretty seamless. Of course, they're going to have their hiccups, but they have looked really confident, aggressive. They're not ball dominant, so they're able to move without the ball. They play so well together, and I think the Mystics are going to be a team that is going to surprise somebody because they're not even at full strength right now. And then you add on Brittany Sykes, who's averaging 26 points. Last year, injury-riddled year, I think it was about 12 or 13 points. This year, she's on a tear. But specifically, it's been the rookie Sonia Citron and Kiki Area-Finn who have really shown out and held their own against the Dream, right? I know they lost to the Valkyries, but they have been proven. They have proved themselves well so far.
I want to ask you both this because obviously the Mystics were a team that had a lot to work with in the draft, this past draft. And they were a team that was really looking to rebuild and build a culture and build a roster that could compete, that the fans could get behind. How impressed are you, and Erica, I'll start with you, with the fact that given there's so many new pieces on this team that a lot of people would not be surprised took a while to get acclimated, not only as individuals, especially because they're rookies and that transition from collegiate game to the professional game can be a lot. And as we know, there's not a lot of time to adjust in the WNBA when you talk about going from college to the draft to training camp to the season. But how impressed with you with what you're seeing with how this team really looks so early in the season?
I mean, it's huge. You also cannot understate that this is a team that, although they were without Elena Delle Donne last year, she officially retired leading into this season. Shakira Austin has been someone who has been hurt. And you also have a player like Aaliyah Edwards, who, is dealing with a little something. Georgia Amore. Unfortunately, we don't get to see that rookie debut. So all of that, right? Those are all big blows to any team. And again, a Mystics team that a lot of people were like, this is a clear rebuild, new coaching staff, etc. but they've come out surging, as Chris has already mentioned, some with Iriafen and with Sonia Citron coming right into the pros, ready to go. Brittany Sykes, I think we're seeing also that veteran leadership, has been with the team here for a little bit. Stephanie Dolson coming back to the Mystics in the last handful of seasons. So I think what you're seeing is probably a little bit earlier, arriving earlier than people anticipated. But what if they can capture this lightning in a bottle, really use this as a reset, a foundational reset? How good can this team be once they do get settled in? I think that's the big question for me, and one that I don't think many people thought would be answered this early in the WNBA season.
Right, because here's what's really interesting. Y'all know last season, they were such a great team when it came to being in close battles, but they always found a way to lose them. Now this season, right, outside of the game against the Valkyries, against the Dream, it was close. Against the Sun, it was close. And even with, a lot of rookies and young players, they have found the recipe to get the job done, whether it's Brittany Sykes, right, Sonia Citron, Kiki Iriafen, you know what I'm saying? You got Shakira Austin, right, who's coming back. This is a team that I feel like with this new coaching staff is really going to test some people. They may not make the playoffs, but they are going to be one fun watch. And that's because they can play so freely, right? Again, nobody has a huge ego on this team. Everybody just wants to succeed and develop. And when you don't have the expectations like some of these other teams, I think sometimes that lends to a more creative and a more free-flowing type of basketball where you see the Mystics having some early success.
You mentioned expectations, and a team that has a lot of expectations, obviously the New York Liberty, the reigning champs, and new this morning, the New York Liberty have a $450 million valuation. That's according to The Athletic. The team has raised capital from a group of investors at the valuation, a record for a pro women's sports franchise, rather. That is double of the last publicly known capital made by a WNBA team. Last summer, Dallas sold 2.5% in stakes at a $208 million valuation. So the deal is still subject to league approval. It's believed to be part of a capital raise to help build the team's new practice facility, a 75,000 square foot facility in Greenpoint. That's Brooklyn, for people who don't know. And it's projected to open in 2027. And it's said that it will, quote, be designed by players for players, which is a huge thing, especially considering how, as we know, this is the last season that the players will play under the current CBA. And one of the things that all these players are looking for is essentially what they deserve. And that's just better working environments, higher pay scales, everything that just goes to the betterment of players. So, Chris, starting with you, how exciting is this when you hear this valuation, when you hear the breaking of the ground, if you will, for a upcoming practice facility that is designed by players for players? I think that's the biggest thing that stood out to me when I read this.
So in 2019, the Tsai family, they bought the Liberty for about between 10 to 14 million, right, from James Dolan.
Which is a steal. The fact that
they are... A steal is an understatement, okay? Right? I don't think that's doing it justice. So the fact that, you have a $450 million valuation, right, according to The Athletic, it shows what investment does when you actually care about the product and you care about the players that you're paying. And so I'm incredibly excited. It's fine, to share the facility, right, with the Brooklyn Nets, but now to get their own, and as you mentioned, it's designed by the players for the players, so they're involved in the process, even if not all of them, not all of them are probably going to be there, right, when the facility opens, but it still shows you the level of involvement, the level of access that they have because of what the Tsai family preaches. And look, they took over Team 2019, and now they brought home a WNBA championship, and they're going to have their own facility. So I think it just speaks volumes about the level of investment and the care that this ownership group has. And one other thing, the Tsai family is going to pay for all of the money for the facility, $80 million. Usually you don't see that happen, right? Because they're asking taxpayers to pay for that.
Erica, your former team doing big things. What can, as we are entering this final year under the CBA, I think the biggest thing is what we can learn. And when I say we, I really mean ownership and these front offices. Obviously, in the offseason, we have Athletes Unlimited. We have Unrivaled, who did huge things in their inaugural year. And now we have this news coming out from The Athletic regarding the New York Liberty, the reigning champs. What are other owners, or what should other owners be writing down in their notebooks on how to make their situations better for their teams?
I love this question because I was able to spend a lot of time at Unrivaled. I've been able to experience Athletes Unlimited, and both of those are very much player-led. In the case of Unrivaled, you have Brianna Stewart, who of course is with the New York Liberty, as well as Nafisa Collier, very involved as co-founders. But some of the things that we are seeing in this new facility for the Liberty are already staples for Unrivaled in particular. Family lounges, full recovery suites, thinking about also a hair, nail, and makeup suite. We saw the Sephora suite for Unrivaled. We know that there are some partnerships that the New York Liberty have picked up. So the player input is huge here. Also, the locker room, each player will have a door they can close to their own suite. So it's like, okay, game plan done. Okay, close that door. I need my Zen time. There's so many things that are now a standard when it comes to the expectations and the facilities for WNBA players. You mentioned, of course, the new CBA coming. We're expecting that players are really going to make a strong case for the salaries to also match now what we're seeing as investment in facilities, because these are world-class athletes. So thinking about the rest of the league, we've got expansion teams coming in. We have other teams like Indiana who've announced plans as well for facilities. This is really an opportunity for teams to level up. There have also been reports that there is a search perhaps for a new owner for the Connecticut Sun. And if I had to guess, some of that had to do with some of the reporting that came out of last year with regard to the facilities, and that they're just not up to par, having to split space because there's a birthday party during the playoffs. Players don't want that anymore, and they shouldn't expect that anymore. And to your point, ownership is being put on notice that this is what you're going to have to do if you want to compete and have the best players in the world and the best players in the WNBA on your team and not somebody else's.
Chris, I want to get your thoughts on this, so hold on to them, and we'll wrap this conversation up right after this break. Welcome back, everyone, to We Need to Talk Now. I'm Ashley Nicole Marsh, joined by Erica Ayala and our very special and first male guest, Chris Williamson, who I promised would have final word on the topic of what other teams can learn from what leagues like Unrivaled, Athletes Unlimited, and most importantly, or most recently, I should say, what came down about the evaluation of the New York Liberty.
What they can learn is either you're going to, as Erica pointed out very well, you're either going to level up or you're going to be left behind, right? It's very clear that is the direction we're heading in, especially, with this new CBA and the CBA coming up, right? And just how things are not going to go like they used to, where the ladies were just happy with the bare minimum or mediocre standards. So like I'm looking at, the Sparks, right? I've heard, reports that they're supposed to have a practice facility that's in the works, but nothing official. You got to level up. I mean, you're in LA, for Christ's sakes. And again, it's about investing in showing your players that you care about their well-being, you care about their careers, their passions. And if you don't do that, then you will be left behind, and the players will not want to come to your organization. And then the players will go elsewhere, and you're going to, be SOL.
This is true. So I see what you did there. This is network after all. We have FCC regulations. Look, when we started the show, we talked about the good and everything we were impressed by in this opening week of the W. But with the good comes the bad, and we have to acknowledge the things that or the teams rather that are struggling in this opening week in the season start. And one team in particular that I want to highlight to start this off is Seattle. I think we were all very just impressed with what they did in the offseason, all the different acquisitions, obviously the changes that went through this franchise. And we said on paper, this is a team that you really have to look out for. I even said with Alicia, this possibly could be the team that's representing the West when it's all said and done. Now, look, very early in the season, this is a way too early overreaction, if you will. But Erica, starting with you, what are some of the things that you've kind of like raised your eyebrows at when it comes to the Seattle Storm?
I think for me, a team that has a decent amount of their core, specifically thinking about Skylar Diggins and Nneka Ogwumike. Of course, they also have Ezi Magbagor back. I was expecting maybe a little bit more cohesion, and maybe that wasn't completely fair because there are a decent amount of pieces that are also new. Alicia Clark coming back, Lee Yuru, of course, Dominique Malunga. But I think they've seemed a bit up and down and not necessarily meeting their full potential. Also, Dominique Malunga getting 10 minutes in her debut and then less than 2 minutes against a Dallas Wings team was a little bit curious to me. I think that this is a Seattle team that's going to have to figure out how to best use the number 2 overall draft pick, especially knowing that her pedigree comes from a very positionless style of basketball, which is the WNBA isn't moving there. The WNBA is there. So I think it's still early. It's going to take a little bit of time. And in speaking with Diggins and Ogwumike after that Dallas game, they do feel more comfortable and confident in their leadership. I think it's hard to come as a veteran to a team like Seattle, who's already proven and established themselves in the WNBA. We know Jewel Lloyd is not with the team any longer. And I think that all of the veterans there are ready to move on. It's just now putting that into action on the court and in gameplay.
Chris, I want to ask you about Dallas. Obviously, they hit the jackpot when they landed Paige Bueckers. No surprise to everyone watching the draft. No surprise to everyone who watched her play in college. We all knew she was going number 1. But Dallas has struggled even with their unicorn, once-in-a-lifetime generational pick to figure out how to make Paige and Arike work together and how to make the team work around those two pieces. What are you seeing? And is it... Again, it's too early to raise any red flags, but what would you say is the biggest thing you want to see this team correct in the next few weeks?
Well, you have to remember that they're also dealing with a first-year head coach in Chris Koklanis, right, coming over from USC. So, one, I want to see some consistency in terms of the roster, right, lineups and the rotations, making sure that you have the best 5 on there for different spots or different lineups that you see on the opposing team, but also... And this is something that we all know. Habits are hard, to get rid of, especially bad habits. So I think that's what we're seeing with Arike Ogunbowale. Like, she's averaging 15, 3, and 2 right now through the first 3 games. And it's on 30% shooting from the field and 25% shooting from three-point land. That is not great. That is not good at all. So I think Arike, in part, has to get adjusted to all the excellent attributes that Paige Bueckers has when it comes to facilitating and making things easier. In addition to probably tinkering with the lineup sometimes, maybe you put Ty Harris out there with Arike and Paige. You get Maddie Segrist coming off the bench. I think she has earned, in some ways, a starting job with the way she's able to play. Now she's able to spread the ball a little bit more, get out that three-point line. So those are some things that I would like to see. It's primarily Arike's habits that she's built, all of her time in the WNBA. They have to die because now, as you said, you have a, really talented future face of your franchise in Paige Bueckers.
Erica, I see you shaking your head at a lot of Chris's points. What stood out to you the most?
I think, again, it's just super early right now. There are a lot of WNBA teams, including, of course, Dallas, that are not only integrating rookies, but then have to ask potentially veteran players to adjust to a new coaching staff. And those things don't happen overnight. I think it's a balance between, in Dallas's case, how much do you trust Arike and what she's been able to do, knowing that there have been times that's been fantastic, and honestly times where, as a collective, Dallas has fallen short. But then you need to balance that with integrating other pieces and potentially learning a new system or a new style. And so I think that things will settle in. I think you absolutely have to let Arike do what Arike is going to do. And it's all about communication, I think, at this stage. What is reasonable and expected of a player like Arike? What are the overall goals of the team? And how do you reconcile any gaps that might exist between those two things?
I want to switch gears and go to a team that was dominant for so long. And this question is for both of you. Chris, I'll start with you. Obviously, it's hard to say number one, and the Liberty right now, they're trying to fight to repeat and stay that top dog. But before them, we saw the top dog in the WNBA for the longest time was the Las Vegas Aces. And it seemed, especially last season, Alicia and I had this conversation. I think for a long time when you had the Aces on your schedule, they struck fear in you, as they should. A dominant team, a championship team, championship pedigree. And it seems specifically last season, they did not seem as invincible as they once did. And specifically going into this first week of the W, that seems more true than ever before. Is this just the changing of the tide in the WNBA, Chris, or is there something else going on here?
What I think is going on is the Las Vegas Aces need help. Specifically, A'ja Wilson needs help, right, in the post. And also, I think something that head coach Becky Hammon has been criticized for, and I think most of the time fairly, is not relying on her bench. Because last year, you had the Olympics, right? So everything is condensed. They had so many players on that Olympic squad. And so, understandably, they're going to be, a little fatigued. And we saw that play out, at the end of the regular season and the postseason where they just didn't have it. There were so many things going on, whether it was Chelsea Gray coming back from injury, Kelsey Plum was dealing with personal issues, and she was not, in the best shape in terms of just mentally, as well as Jackie Young, she dealt with injuries. So I think it's not a change in the guard. I think it's just you have to rely on getting a more trustworthy bench, or at least trust them to see what they can do before you pull the plug on them. But specifically, it's in the post, and I know Erica's going to touch on this. It's in the post giving A'ja Wilson help, because as great as Kia Stokes is when it comes to her rebounding, passing, all that, a defender, she really does not give you a whole lot of production when it comes to her scoring, and she is not a threat.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, you nailed it right there. Kia Stokes, has never averaged in any season. She's been with New York, obviously with the Vegas Aces now. She's never averaged more than 10 points in a season. And what we're also seeing, if you look at all of the post players on this roster right now that have seen action on the court, none of them has tallied in a couple of games more than 3 points. That is massive. That means you are asking A'ja Wilson as that front court presence to basically score all of the points. New York in that first game dominated points in the paint. But what also, again, I mentioned positionless basketball. What's going to start happening is if you can pull A'ja Wilson out of the paint, given whoever she's matched up on, now you have an open lane to the basket. And we saw that is what New York was able to do against Vegas. So you need it on both sides, but specifically to keep defenses honest, A'ja Wilson needs some help from the post players. And if you don't get that, then you absolutely have to shoot lights out from the perimeter. Now, Vegas can do that, but are they going to be able to do that every night? That's a large task to ask of Wilson and of the backcourt.
Chris, you mentioned the bench and either the inability or the lack of desire to go to it, or just not having the substantial pieces. Is this one of the reasons why so many people were taken aback by the Aces releasing Deja Kelly, who had a phenomenal preseason?
No, I think that was more so because of, the previous GM and the contracts that she made with players, right? Specifically, Kirsten Bell, who has had some bright spots, especially in that Connecticut Sun game. But I think a lot of fans and people, are not as high on her as they once were when she came to the league. So that plays a role, right, with the limited amount of money. But to their credit, right, Becky Hammond, Nikki Fargas, they've done a good job, picking up Dana Evans, right, Crystal Bradford, Shannon Parker-Tyus also is somebody who picked up. Then you got Liz Kitley, right, who's coming off that ACL tear. So there are people, right, on that bench that have proven, to show up, and then you're still waiting to see what they can do. So now it's just a matter of getting them in these positions where they're able to collaborate with the veterans, the people who know what they're doing, and see how they can mesh together, and then you go from there.
Erica is sticking around, but we are going to let Chris go. It won't be the last time we have you on the show. Yes, this is a women's sports pod by women for women, but you have been one of the biggest allies I personally know when it comes to the advancement of women in sports, women's sports in general. So you are always welcome to share your insight on this show. Thank you so much for joining us. And after the break, we have a very special interview. You're not going to want to miss it. Welcome back, everyone, to We Need to Talk Now, presented by AT&T. Ashley Nicole Moss, Erica Ayala. And before the break, I teased a very special interview, and it is special indeed because it is not every day you get to sit down with one of the GOATs of the WNBA, and that is what I got to do with Diana Taurasi, a.k.a. the White Mamba. And I asked her kind of what we've been talking about this entire show so far is it too soon in the season to get too high or too low, or what we're seeing from some of these teams? And she also gave me her way too early finals pick. I got that out of her. So take a look at this and we'll react. There have been some new teams that we have seen formulated over the offseason, the Seattle Storm being one. They completely revamped the team, the Washington Mystics, and some teams are performing better than others in this first opening weekend, and some are having a little bit of a slow start. What do you want people to know about not getting too high or getting too low on the first product that you see on the court, when the season immediately starts?
Yeah, I was always a big proponent of you can't peak too early. And all these teams are figuring a lot of things out. When you think about how short the training camp session is for us, where it's, 2 weeks and then you throw in 2 preseason games and, you have a roster of 21 players that get trimmed down to 12 or 11. This first 2 or 3 weeks of the season, you're really going to work well together at the same time, trying to make sure you beat the other team. So, that first month of the season, it's always going to benefit the more veteran teams, the teams that have been together, the cores that have been together for 3 or 4 years. And I think as the season goes on, you're going to really see these teams formulate these winning habits, and it's going to be a great season.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot before I let you go. I want you to pick your finals matchup and your winner right here, right now. Your way too early prediction. Give it to me.
Way too early. That's why I never get on podcasts, because you always that's why I don't do these. I'm going to go in the finals. I'm going to go with New York Liberty versus Minnesota rematch.
Ooh.
And I'm going to go with New York.
That is a big take, especially seeing how that last series went and some people still being upset about it.
That's an early season peaking too early prediction.
All right, so DT has a rematch of last year's finals, but the Liberty still coming out on top in that one. Erica, how are you feeling? You agreeing? You disagreeing? Where are you leaning towards?
I mean, first of all, I would just like to say that for 45 minutes, I did my part. If indeed it is a run back year, everyone plays their role. But I agree. I do agree that the New York Liberty are my, early prediction to win a championship in 2025. Now, I did not pick them going up against the Lynx. I do have the Aces slotting in there, as much as I do think the front court is a little bit of a bugaboo, Asia Wilson cannot be stopped. So I'm curious to see, especially because things have already gone down a little different than I was expecting. Some teams, as I said earlier, coming out in what feels like almost mid-season form, not perfect, but pretty dang good. So I guess we'll just have to see who's right. I mean, I don't know how you argue with the GOAT, though.
Come on. If anyone knows, it's DT. Listen, she's obviously very much enjoying her retirement. She told me, and the full episode will be on our YouTube channel, so make sure you check that out. The We Need to Talk YouTube channel. We post everything on there. But she's very much enjoying retirement. And when I asked her if she misses it, being in the trenches, she was like, no, I'm actually enjoying being a fan. Like when I retired, I was ready. I knew what I wanted to do and I didn't regret it. I don't have any regrets, even months removed from the announcement. But while her career on the court has ended, there are a bunch of players in the league right now just beginning theirs. So we're going to highlight some rookies. What has been something for you that has been the most impressive by certain rookies, a handful of rookies? I know for me, it's just, I'm always just taken aback by how poised these rookies are, considering they have no time to adjust. And we keep talking about how especially if you end up in the tournament, it's the college season, it's the championship season, it's declaring for the draft, it's preseason, it's training camp, it's preseason, then it's the regular season. But some of these rookies, Erica, you would think they've been doing it. They're 3 years in the W. I mean, what has impressed you the most? And are there any specific rookies you want to highlight?
I mean, you hit on it right there. I think the preparedness, like these players came ready to ball. And I think there are a few different things that you could point to with regard to that. But this rookie class, I think, also got to benefit from seeing what a lot of people believe is the biggest spike that we've seen. And I don't really think it's arguable that it's true. We've seen the biggest spike that we've seen in interest in the WNBA because of Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and that rookie class. But also, we know that when you're a rookie, there are some welcome to the W moments. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, these rookies, we alluded to it earlier, these rookies, they're like, listen, I'm not getting got. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Or at least not for long, not without getting my lick back. And so these rookies have come out to play. They seem ready, not just for the game, but also for the physicality and knowing that that's where they have to level up. I love to see that. I mean, whether we're talking Kiki Iriafen, who we've already mentioned in preseason, I think Paige Bueckers getting really excited to just kind of, really post up. Nafisa Collier, come on now. Like, they're not scared. And I love it.
You mentioned Paige Bueckers. She's averaged 13.7 points, almost 5 rebounds, almost 7 assists through her first 3 games. She had 12 and 10 in a loss to Minnesota. And that came after a 19.6 rebound, 8 assist performance against Seattle. I mean, again, when you talk about Paige, I think she's the perfect example because I think last year, we had a similar kind of conversation around Caitlin Clark, but it was different, right? Caitlin had a little bit of a more rough start coming into the W, and a lot of people with way too early conversation around that was like, is she going to be able to adjust? Was she just a college star? Paige, though, is just a completely different conversation in the event that this is a player who's on a team that won a national championship, and she hasn't missed a beat. What is it specifically about her game, though, that you think just transitions so easily? And I use that in air quotes because we obviously don't know what she's feeling behind the scenes. But from what we can see, the transition's been almost seamless for her.
I think it's that Paige, like you said, is coming off a championship. That is definitely something that she was able to take off of her college career. We know that Paige Bueckers and a lot of these young players coming up, they knew of the WNBA for their whole lives. This is really kind of the first few draft classes where that's a thing, that they knew about women's basketball, could aspire at a very young age to get here. But as Paige said, I believe it was after that first game, just getting here, that's not the dream. It's beyond that. It's about how you perform and really taking sight of that, her professionalism that she brings. And you can look at what Caitlin Clark is doing, getting triple doubles left and right here, like she's opening a bag of Skittles or something like that. She just is immediate right now with Caitlin Clark. And maybe that will come for Paige, but the fact that she can be steady is huge because that's what her team needs her to be. I think the next level for her, and we even heard it during that UConn season, is for her now to be a little selfish. Play make not just for other people, but make sure she's getting her shot as well, because that's only going to benefit the Dallas Wings when it comes down to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, just completely in awe of these rookies and what they've been able to do in such a short amount of time. Listen, when we come back, CBS has some games, y'all. You're not going to want to miss it. We've been talking about the players. We've been talking about teams to watch. Well, these games are going to be games you want to watch, and we're going to break them down right after this. We got games on CBS. First, kicking it off Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern. It's my New York Liberty facing the red-hot Indiana Fever. That is going to be on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus. But we're not done, because at 3 p.m. Eastern, it's the Dallas Wings at the Atlanta Dream right here on CBS Sports Network. And one team has a brand new court, which I absolutely love, and the other has Paige Bueckers. You're not going to want to miss any game, so make sure you just tune into them both and enjoy Saturday hoops. You know, it's the best time to watch basketball. Ashley Nicole Moss here, Erica Ayala. And Erica, let's start with the Liberty and the Fever, because two teams on two different trajectories, right? You have the Liberty trying to defend their title, and they have looked phenomenal so far. And you have a Fever team that is capitalizing off of what they built last season when they got Caitlin Clark, but just the impressive talent they already had on their roster, made a lot of moves in the offseason from a roster standpoint to the front office to coaching to really make sure that this team was built to compete, not down the line, but right now. What are you looking for in this matchup?
This is going to be a really great barometer and a great test for both of these teams, to be honest. Now, let's just take it back to last season, because Indiana was able to get some games up on New York, who became the eventual champion. So the Indiana Fever, we saw the elements coming together, having that backcourt of Kelsey Mitchell and Caitlin Clark as she started to find her stride. Bring in then Aaliyah Boston. That's that core, right? Now you add more pieces to that with Natasha Howard. You've got, of course, Sydney Colson that can be another veteran, and DeWanna Bonner, who in her first game in her Indiana Fever debut got to 3rd overall on the all-time scoring list in the WNBA. And I don't even think we've seen the best of Bonner yet. That's what Indiana is bringing. Then you have New York, that they had Leonie Fibic in their starting lineup. She did not start last year until the playoffs and was fantastic for them. Had one practice, and then the game against the Las Vegas Aces, where she was picking up Chelsea Gray full court. Sis was locked in defensively, but only 2 points. So for the New York Liberty, Leonie Fibic, can she get more acclimated and involved in the offense? Didn't shoot particularly well from the perimeter. Sabrina Ionescu had less than 10 points. But as I mentioned earlier on the show, they dominated the Vegas Aces in points in the paint. You had Jonquel Jones shooting from the perimeter. She's almost automatic from there. So there's so many elements for New York. It's now just about getting all of the pieces to sing at the right pitch, at the right tone, at the right time. And they're going to need all of that against Indiana, who I think is going to want to play what you might call a prove-it game this early against New York.
Yeah, a good measuring stick for both teams for different reasons. And that also brings us to our next matchup, the Wings at the Dream. Now, obviously, Atlanta's been moving the ball well this season, so this will be a good defensive test for Dallas. But also, look, let's be honest, Dallas is looking to improve on their chemistry, specifically in the backcourt. So that's one thing we're going to be looking for. But in this particular matchup, you have two teams that are trying to fix, I feel like, two drastically different issues. What is this matchup and the outcome of this matchup going to tell you?
I think for me, it's all about what team is going to be able to settle in and play their game. I give the edge to Atlanta right now. As you mentioned, they're moving the ball well. Tahina Pau able to be inserted into that starting lineup as a rookie because of the unfortunate news of an injury with Jordan Canada. We just recently got an update on her as well. So, I think that the poise and finishing out games was somewhat of a bugaboo for Atlanta last year. They seem to have figured that out, at least in stretches, not for a complete game, as we saw when they played Indiana, but, they're getting there. And so I want to see them continue to move on that. As you mentioned, defense, Dallas defense, they're going to have to focus on that. I also want to see Paige Bueckers look for her shot a little bit more. She doesn't have to necessarily pull up shots that she's not ready to take, but she has to at least be looking for that, identify when that is available to her, because that's only going to open up the offense for everyone else.
Look, it may only be 1 week into the season, but that is not stopping us making too early predictions. And that's not going to stop power rankings, because every week the power ranking list will change. And we're going to do a mini version of that right after this break. But as a reminder, just want to let you know that if you missed any minute of the show, you can catch full-length episodes, special edition content, interviews, and everything in between on the We Need to Talk YouTube page. So make sure you are locked in there, and make sure you don't move, because when we get back, we're talking power rankings. Welcome back, everyone. And before the break, I said just because it is a week into the season doesn't mean we're not going to do power rankings. I mean, come on. 3 teams that look the best right now. I will kick things off here. I feel like for me, New York, Indiana, Minnesota, for different reasons, but also similar reasons. New York, the reigning champs, look like they haven't missed a step, which is what you want when you're trying to repeat for a title. I think Minnesota looks like a team that got the short end of the stick in that series and did not forget it. And they're coming back with a vengeance. Fee is absolutely balling. But if you saw her in Unrivaled like Erica and I did, you're not surprised. She's been hooping all season long, all year long, really. And Indiana, I'm just so impressed by a team. Obviously, when you have Caitlin Clark on your team, there are no surprises. But the fact that this is still such a young team, and you would kind of be okay with the fact that they're going through the growing pains and trying to figure it out along the way. They just look like they have experienced 4 seasons between last season and this season. I'm so excited to see what they look like throughout the course of this W season. Eric, I know you and I share some thoughts on some of our power rankings, but who do you have?
I have New York and Minnesota as well. I do not have Indiana. However, I want to, hitch my little wagon on Indiana before I move on to the team I have, because I really want people to understand and realize that Indiana not only revamped what was happening on the court, but on the roster, right? But they got Stephanie White to come back to the organization. This is an Indiana team that has had high picks in the last handful of seasons, in the last 10 years or so. But they revamped also their front office, and all signs point to winning. And so I love that. However, Phoenix is my pick here. You know what? I would like to apologize to the X Factor, because I wasn't so sure about Phoenix. You know what I'm saying? Like, I believe in AT, the engine. I love me some Satu Sabali, and I just wasn't sure. This is a franchise moving on from Diana Taurasi, who was on the show earlier, moving on from Brittany Griner, who went to Atlanta in the offseason. You know what I'm saying? Like, those are big names. And listen, Satu and AT said, we got it. We got it. They were good to go. And I love it. Starting off undefeated to start the season with the energy, with the power. They have some role players that are doing their thing. They're looking good. Nate Tippett's got that team looking pretty good.
Yeah, Phoenix is definitely a team, like you said, surprising to some people that you definitely can't sleep on. And you would not be shocked if they went through some growing pains after losing those names that you just mentioned. Erica, it has been an absolute privilege to have you on this show. I love listening to you speak. I love talking with you. And this won't be the last time we have you on. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, Chris Williamson, for joining us earlier in the show. And if you missed any of the show, no worries. We got you covered. forward, make sure you are locked into our YouTube channel. But if you want to easily find us, and that includes on podcasts, wherever you get your pods, Spotify, Apple, all that good stuff, you can scan this QR code right here and we will pop up wherever you get your pods. I know Alicia wishes she could be here, but she is enjoying her vacation, so you enjoy that, sis. And she will be back next time on We Need to Talk Now, presented by AT&T.